Hi everybody, welcome to Lecture 3. This is the last in a three-part series on socialism, Marxism, and anarchism. As you see on the screen in front of you, we are to the last of these great philosophical, economic, social systems that came out in the 19th century and the challenges of the industrial era. That would be anarchism. Now, I saved anarchism for last because of the three, it has a much smaller pool in the general population. Socialism becomes a mass movement in many places. Marxism, of course, is an interpretation of socialism, becomes a mass movement. Anarchism has always had a relatively small following, as you'll see here in a minute. Now, like socialism and Marxism, anarchism is a utopian thought system, which is at the end of the revolution, development, eventually the world, as depicted in socialism and Marxism, will eventually come to a place of complete social, political, economic equality, world peace, happiness, utopia. The artwork you see in front of you by the Impressionist artist Camille Pissarro, who himself had anarchist leanings, shows three ladies and a man, and I think they're harvesting fruit. It's a little hard to see. It looks a little too big to be nuts, although it could be nuts, I guess. It could be walnuts or I don't know what but anyways, harvesting. It's a very peaceful scene. It's beautiful. Maybe a sunlit afternoon as they're harvesting. This very peaceful, calm scene of domestic agricultural tranquility, peace. That is the anarchist goal. Now, the method to get there and to achieve that is quite different than socialism and Marxism. So anarchism, social, economic, political equality for all, same exact goal. But their description of the problem is very different. They don't believe that simply the government is wrongly formatted by conservative elements, the aristocracy, nobility, and if you simply reorganize that government to be led by the people in a democratic process, fairly, with equity, as described by the socialists and the Marxists, anarchists believe any government of whatever philosophy, whether it's a traditional kind of feudal philosophy or so, it doesn't matter. Any organized society in large numbers inherently is corrupting. Any government. So the anarchist goal is to eliminate all large-scale government. The only really functional government would be very small, localized, completely democratic, basically town hall meetings. That is the only government at all that can ever work. Any large government inherently being larger grows maybe unintentionally, but cruel to people, disconnected from the people, and social problems and exploitation inevitably follow. So the anarchist vision is not to completely replace the government with the government by the people headed in some. No, it's going to be a completely local, organic, we're talking village level democratic government. There would be no nation state whatsoever as we think of it, nor even state governments. No large-scale governments of any kind, because those inherently set up the fissures in society that lead to all social problems in the first place. Instead, keep everything local, local, local. Your local town hall, everybody goes and vote and discuss, we do it with the water and so forth. That's the largest form of government. Anything bigger than that it's a problem. By the way, anarchism in this context does not mean, as they would see it, chaos. Now, when we say anarchy, that means the absence of the rule of law. That usually means nightmare, right? Unless you're a person that thrives in anarchy. For most of us, it's a nightmare, right? Not safe for your kids, not safe for your family. It's the wild, wild west. That's not what the anarchists, as they would see it. They would see it, no, anarchy simply means, in the philosophical term, the political term, the absence of a large-scale government, which is the core problem. Solution? Get rid of any large-scale government of any kind and instead live in small, peaceful, cooperative, democratic villages. That's the largest government that can ever function in a healthy way. Everything else needs to go. So, into organized society. Nope. No more organized society. On the left you see a banner, and anarchists may say no gods, no masters. again, as they would see it, is that's the ordering, the hierarchy of society that inevitably flows from a large organized government. That's what the kind of no gods, no masters. Now, by the way, he is atheistic. That is true. They see human nature is positive. They don't believe in some kind of contest between good and evil in that kind of context. The no masters, again, is no government far away, disconnected from you, telling you what to do. Instead, you and your local friends, families, and neighborhood, you are the complete and only government has any say over your life. And that one you can freely democratically participate in. It actually takes your voice into consideration. It's the only fair, healthy government of any kind. The painting there on the right is by the Impressionist artist Paul Signac, and he is depicting this kind of beautiful scene on the beach of people relaxing. That is, again, the anarchist kind of utopia. People in that painting you see, they'll all be cooperative, live in a local village, they'll all cooperate with each other. Apparently it's their day off. And maybe they already got all the work done, so let's all take a little break, which they're doing right now, and relaxing. That is the idea of the anarchist utopia. Now, how do you get this? Because I don't know about you, but you're scratching your head like, that sounds nice, but I've never seen that before. Yeah, you haven't. Where did this come from? So this comes from disgruntled Marxists, socialists, and others on the left, who felt that socialism and Marxism was not working the way they had planned it, and grew frustrated with it. Probably also, frankly, grew frustrated with kind of the dominant intellectual personalities within socialism and Marxism. Did not like what being told probably what to do, and said maybe the best solution is no one tells them what to do except, again, the cooperative local community. Both Marxists and socialism, even though they're calling for eventually kind of rule of the people, but they do imply an all-powerful government who, again, is running that system of equality. Both Marxism and socialism, again, even though they say democratic eventually, but there is some overarching government who's making decisions. Now, they'd say it's for the good of the people, and all of you are involved in that, but that government is ultimately in charge, like for the people. Anarchists, at the end of the day, don't trust that. Say, no, maybe perhaps that's an improvement over the traditional feudal-style government, capitalistic-style government, but it is fundamentally flawed because, again, there's a power differential of those in some centralized location making decisions. It'll never really represent the voice of the people. The only safe government is the local government. End of story. Now, how are you going to make this happen? Like the Marxist and like some socialists, I felt only violence, frankly, is going to happen. Because people like their privileged positions. They're not going to willingly give up. So anarchists is like, well, we have to use anarchist revolution to achieve this. And we have to bring the government itself crashing to the ground. Now, this is perhaps the more well-known part of anarchism that has come into popular culture, the idea of assassinations, bombings, because some anarchists did believe that would be the way to eliminate the government. So you essentially decapitate the government, assassinations, bombings, etc., to eliminate the presidents, the rulers, the kings, and so forth. And society, in that kind of chaotic moment, can then have an awakening and settle into the only government that's truly representative of the people, the local, small-scale government. End of story. Now, anarchists, how you come out of that chaos of violence into that peaceful situation, that's again where, we'll come back to that here in a minute. Okay. So as anarchists develop, the idea that probably violence is required. Again, you have to get rid of any kind of government, and that maybe the quickest way is through assassinations, bombings. No, through education, of course, too. Let people know this is a better way to live, so naturally you try to convince them. But they also believe some people are never given their power, so violence is required. Our American president, William McKinley, was killed by an anarchist. Now, he was also a little bit crazy, so he was kind of anarchist plus mental health issues combined. But his own mind, though, he's doing it for anarchist reasons, which is McKinley's a president. America would be better off without a central American government in Washington, D.C. Better have a local, Merced government. That'd be the biggest, or Atwater government, or Belico, or, pick your town, right? So that's kind of their vision. Now, this also is a constant backlash, naturally, to anarchism because they do assassinate some world leaders. They assassinate a Russian czar. They assassinate a French premier, an American president, plus other assassination bombings too. So this does lead to, naturally, governments, of course, naturally fear an anarchist. But I even say the general public is, I'd say, on the whole, deeply skeptical of anarchism, even though perhaps they like the kind of the vision of the local community living in peaceful prosperity. Most people say that does sound nice to me. But the idea that that can remain that way, that there's not going to be like one town in the area gets more powerful, wants to abuse others, that there's no central government whatsoever, seems in the eyes of many people around the world to be incredibly naive. That's why anarchism has never been able to generate the large following that say socialism, Marxism, because most human societies, like, I may not be an expert political theorist, but the idea that suddenly you're not going to have an Attila the Hun anymore, or a Julius Caesar, or Napoleon who wants to get bigger, take stuff. You're simply going to have just your local town, that there is no nation anymore, and that somehow people are going to be all cooperative and nice with each other. Sounds wonderful, but I just don't see it. I don't trust my neighbors. I'm not saying personally, you know what I'm saying. So the anarchists do have a very rosy view of human nature once they finally get their utopia. So people being selfish now, exploiting each other, but somehow, magically, in getting into the anarchist utopia, somehow that selfishness, that aggression, willing to attack others, all that will somehow disappear. People will live peacefully like the Smurfs. Actually, personally, Smurfs, you know what I'm saying. So for those reasons, anarchism has had a much more. Now, by the way, I'm not saying it has had a following. It has had a following. By the way, anarchism, not surprisingly, has never had a chance to really implement their ideology, because no country in the world has ever gone anarchist. Now, there's been anarchy, chaos in countries through warfare and stuff, but never an anarchist. Now, there's been some anarchist groups and movements. There's still some on the internet. But none of them, not surprisingly, because they have a hard time organizing. Because again, how do you even organize if you're an anarchist? Almost by definition, organizing an anarchist almost makes you a non-anarchist. So I'd say good luck. All right, so significance of socialism, Marxism, communism, anarchism. So these ideologies attempt to radically reorder human society from how it had functioned. Again, all three of them are utopian. The vision is a complete radical transformation of how societies function till now. These ideas, again, compared to American system, they're very different from the liberal Republican American capitalism of the American political system. Very different. These ideologies would compete or battle with liberal Republican capitalism and fascism for most of the 20th century and the 21st century. World War II is a big battle between fascism, communism, or Marxism, and liberal democratic capitalism as well. And that conflict still remains, as you guys know. In fact, in America right now, we're still seeing an iteration of that. In this case, socialism. The Democratic Party has parts of it, but parts of that, I say the more far left Democratic Party, has certainly some strong aspects of socialism. The Republican Party, more traditional, is embracing more liberal Republican capitalism. But again, the Democratic Party is a big tent, by the way. There's plenty of Democrats who don't want socialism either. They want some social programs, but not socialism in its full form. So I'd say by degrees. Certainly some European nations have aspects of socialism, but they also have aspects of liberal capitalism. I'd say there's no current country really in the world that is completely like socialist currently. Some of them a little closer. For example, Cuba. I think Cuba is still considered some socialist, but Cuba economically is in terrible shape, as you guys know. So there are very few people in the world who are looking at Cuba or say Venezuela as like a socialist experiment and saying that's looking very good. So I'd say today it's more of a blending of some aspects of socialism in some nations, and certainly aspects of capitalism as well too. But finishing out last sentence there again, if you guys are taking notes, it's a good time to pause here and make sure you guys write this down. Aspects of socialism, Marxism have influenced much political and social thinking in our current world. The idea of class struggle, government-operated social programs, ideas like economic justice, anti-capitalism, anti-globalism, secularism, all those are in part spin-offs of socialism and Marxism, and to a much lesser extent, anarchism. all three thought systems are to some degree anti-liberal in their pure state. Now, it's important to say pure state. Again, in Europe, you don't have many people who are complete socialists, or you have some. But in their pure state, they're anti-liberal. How is that? Because in all three of these thought systems, in their pure state, in theory, everyone needs to think and behave alike. That's anti-liberal. Anti-liberal is protection of the individual. But in these three thought systems, if you really, in this pure system, you need to think and behave alike. For example, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, intellectual free inquiry, and dissent is not acceptable if it challenges the dominant societal orthodoxy, in this case, socialism, Marxism, anarchism. Because none of those are about the individual, they're all collective. The collective always trumps the individual in those systems. In liberal capitalism, we're trying to balance the individual and the collective. And sometimes we wrestle with that, right? It's not easy. Sometimes we probably get it wrong. We try to battle, with that. But that would not exist in the socialist, Marxist, or anarchist pure state. There would be no battle because the individual must give way to the majority. So the individual's agency or free will to chart one's own path is more limited. For example, if you are in any of these nations, like, well, I would like to own a big piece of property. No. Or you're a person of faith, and I want to open up a new church, a new synagogue, a new mosque, a new Sikh temple, etc. And the answer to that is going to be no, because all three thought systems are atheistic in their pure state. And I'd probably say religion is problematic. There is no God. We're not going to allow you to dupe the masses. Your application ability to build that religious building and have followers is denied. But you might say, my freedom of religion, like, no, you're in a collective society, you don't have that. And we decided that religion is a sham. So, no. Violence over differences is ingrained in the formation of the systems. Now, this is a problem for all three of them, which is, if you build the revolution initially on large-scale violence, and you kind of need to, although again, some socialists argue you would not have to. You could do it through democratic means. But certainly Marxism and anarchism, the initial system is built on a great deal of violence. As a historian, I don't know how you practice a great deal of violence and then peace and prosperity quickly emerges afterwards. There's going to be long-term side effects from that violence. But sometimes nations do have to have violence in the formation. We did, right? I'm not going to be naive about that. But you do pay a long-term price for that. And to be very careful with the extent of violence and how that violence is, where that goes and the repercussions of that violence. I mentioned this one already, but it's helpful to mention one more time. No protection of individual rights that run counter to the majority. If the majority thinks you should not do it, then you can't appeal to, say, a Bill of Rights, which we currently have in our liberal Republican capitalism. There's not going to be a Bill of Rights to protect you. You might have the general right, like you can equal food, equal access to housing, all that stuff. But that's kind of the end of your individual right. That's really a collective right. It's not an individual right, it's a collective right. There are no true limits on the power of, quote, the people. So the majority makes the decision, you must salute and follow. Now, finally, getting to the end here, how did America respond to all this? Because again, we're talking about American history. These are European imports. Since socialism, Marxism, and anarchism are very different alternatives to America's whole history of liberal capitalism, it's a very profound jump for most Americans to abandon faith in what we call the American way. For most Americans, the tenets or beliefs of these systems held alarming challenges to ideals most Americans held dear. For example, religious faith, ownership of private property, distrust of any large powerful government, pride in individualism, hard-worthy success, etc. All of those we have to let go of. Again, religion tends to be, at best, frowned upon, if not actively stamped out. Ownership of private property. A lot of Americans led that. I want to own my own house. I want to own my own land. Nope, you're not going to. Cannot. It's public domain for everybody. I don't like the government telling me what to do. Well, they're going to tell you what to do. Now again, let's say it's for your own good, but they're going to tell you what to do, what you can and cannot do. Pride in individualism, nope, that has to go. There's the collective. So you can be proud you're part of the collective, but not an individual. So not surprisingly, because of that, many Americans held these systems with a considerable amount of fear, because for many things they consider critical to who they are as a people would be challenged by these. Religious faith, the idea to own your own land, government telling you what to do, loss of individual liberties, all those things. For many Americans, they shudder look at these systems. Additionally, unlike the Europeans in the 19th century when these systems were developed, Americans feel that we have ability to alter economic, social conditions much more profoundly. So, for example, if I don't like the work week, and I think the work week is exploitive, America has a natural system to deal with that. Now, but it takes time in a democracy, as we all know. It could take a lot of effort, too. But you do have the ballot box, right? And in general, the American economy was much more, I guess, even though it's capitalistic, equitable than the European context in which these philosophies developed. We're not saying there wasn't many poor Americans. There was plenty of poor Americans. But comparatively, compared to Europe, there's much more economic mobility for the typical American, even when they start at the lowest rungs. So they feel, I'd say, in general, better the system, perhaps, even though I'm not happy with it right now, but I can participate in it and be successful with it over time. But despite this, let me move this down so you can see that. Despite this, there were some Americans. And despite most Americans rejecting these systems, there's some Americans who are reading and hearing about socialism, Marxism, anarchism, and that makes sense to them, and they plug in. Why is that? What Americans would that? Well, obviously Americans are deeply troubled by something economically, perhaps racial inequality, the social inequality, colonialism, imperialism, etc., and their belief that the current American form of government under the Constitution, liberal Republican capitalism, is not addressing these issues properly, perhaps never will, or too slowly. These issues must be dealt with, and dealt with far more radically than our current form of government will ever be able to do. Now, if you believe that, then perhaps socialism, Marxism, anarchism will be for you. Again, if you're not a person of faith, or no longer a person of faith, you're not interested in so much the individual liberties and so forth, but you're interested in the collective prosperity or equity, equality, these systems may make sense to you. In that case, maybe you would join socialism, Marxism, anarchism, and certainly a minority of Americans absolutely did. And part of that's an ongoing story, as you guys know right now. Certainly, in the college level, you don't have to go too far to find a professor who's strongly socialist, occasionally find one's even a Marxist, which is, I don't know whether to think about that in the 21st century, who can still be a Marxist, but there are some. And now anarchists could take more work, but you get on the internet, it won't take too long on the internet. Now to find what I'd say a truly committed intellectual anarchist would take time. There are what I'd call some weekend warriors who imagine they're anarchists, who more like the idea of kind of violent confrontation and so forth. I'm not sure how deeply committed they are to the philosophical basis of what true anarchism is. But with that, we're going to leave that right there at the end of these 3 lectures. So we'll stop right there. So we'll see you with the next one. Take care, everybody.